Do you ever feel like you're just drowning in news? Headlines pulling you every which way, and it's almost impossible to really get a handle on what's actually happening.
Oh, absolutely. It's information overload, isn't it?
It really is. And that's exactly why we do this deep dive. We try to cut through all that noise, give you the clearest insights from the stuff you really need to know.
Right.
So today we're diving into a whole stack of sources. We've got heavy bombardments in Ukraine, shifting economic tensions, U.S.-China, U.S.-Brazil, and a really critical humanitarian crisis in Syria.
Yeah, and it might seem like these are totally separate things, right? But when you dig in, you start seeing these threads connecting them.
Like what?
Well, things like global interconnectedness, obviously, but also just how incredibly hard it is to get reliable information these days. And, the ripple effects of conflict, often in ways you just don't expect. So we've pulled from all over official statements, legal analyses, humanitarian reports. The goal is really to dissect each one, give a context so you can see what's actually going on.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start with Ukraine. It sounds like it was a particularly rough night.
Yeah, very much so. Regional authorities are reporting in the last 24 hours, at least 7 people killed, 21 injured from Russian attacks across different areas.
And the Ukrainian Air Force mentioned drone attacks.
That's right. They said Russia launched 78 Shahed drones. Those are the Iranian-designed kamikaze types. Ukrainian air defenses actually did pretty well, intercepted 51 of them.
51 out of 78. That's impressive.
It is. But here's the kicker. Even the drones they shot down caused damage.
How? Debris.
Exactly. The debris fell in 2 other areas, on top of the 7 locations that were hit by the 27 drones that did get through.
Wow. So even success comes with a cost.
Precisely. And Ukraine's using, a mix of things to defend themselves: fighter jets, mobile artillery, electronic warfare, anti-aircraft systems. It's a layered approach.
And the regional impacts, where were the casualties?
Okay, so in Kharkiv, Governor Syniehubov reported 6 dead, 8 injured. That was in the city, and 9 nearby places.
6 dead in Kharkiv alone.
Yeah. Then further west in Donetsk, Governor Falashkin said 1 person died, 7 injured in Kostantinivka.
Okay.
And down south in Kherson, Governor Prokudin reported no deaths, thankfully, but 2 people were injured.
And Sumy, you mentioned FPV drones there.
Right. Russian forces reportedly used those first-person view drones, the small, agile ones, to hit 30 different places in Sumy.
30? Those FPVs are becoming really common, aren't they?
They are. Very effective for precise hits. Now, adding another layer here, there's a claim from the Russian side.
Okay, what's that?
The Russian-appointed governor in Kherson, Vladimir Saldo, he reported that Russian forces attacked the port of Ochakiv in Mykolaiv.
Ochakiv? Why there?
Saldo claimed it's where Ukrainian troops recently tried to land at a tender spite, which is a strip of land in Kherson. He said that landing attempt failed. Ukrainians retreated towards Odessa after taking losses.
And the Ochakiv attack itself?
He described it as surgical, using multiple launch rocket systems, and claimed it caused considerable Ukrainian losses.
Okay, but this is the Russian claim.
Exactly. And this is crucial. This info comes from official Russian sources. It hasn't been independently confirmed by Ukraine or anyone else.
Right, the information bubble you mentioned earlier.
Precisely. What's fascinating here is how quickly an unverified claim, especially from an official source, can shape a narrative. Even if it's later disproven, it's already out there, potentially justifying actions or influencing perception. It's proactive information warfare.
That point about the information bubble is critical. So for our listener, when they're seeing these conflicting reports, what's a practical way to cut through that noise beyond just cross-referencing? Is there more to it?
Well, yeah, I think it comes down to constantly questioning the source's intent and their track record. Ask yourself, who actually benefits from this specific story being believed?
Okay.
And just as important, what information is missing? It's not just about finding 2 sources that say the same thing. It's about understanding the different angles, the potential biases, and spotting the gaps. It's an active thing, not just a one-off check.
That makes sense. It's an ongoing critical assessment. Now, still in Ukraine, but shifting gears completely, there's this other consequence of the war that's just, well, biblical almost. Locusts.
Yeah, it's truly shocking how far the tentacles of conflict can reach. Beyond the direct fighting, Ukraine is now dealing with a massive and really unexpected challenge, a huge locust invasion. It's threatening whole plantations in places like Zaporizhia, Mykolaiv, Kherson.
And this is directly because of the war.
Directly linked. The fighting has made normal pest control basically impossible. Ukraine's chief phytosanitary inspector explained it's this awful mix of abandoned land, high temperatures, and the Russian occupation.
Wow.
And then there's the Kakhovka Dam destruction last year. Kyiv blames Russia for blowing it up.
Right.
That created huge flooded areas, which unfortunately turned into perfect breeding grounds for these insects.
Unbelievable. Like something out of Exodus.
Pretty much. And to make it even worse, the natural predators, like birds, they're avoiding the combat zones, so there's nothing keeping the locusts in check.
So what's the impact on farming?
It's bad. Denis Machuk, he's the VP of Ukraine's biggest agricultural association, warned that farmers are losing up to a third of their crops in some areas. A third.
A third. That's devastating for food supply, for the economy.
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really illustrates how conflicts spin off these complex, often completely unforeseen environmental and humanitarian crises.
Yeah.
It's way beyond just the battlefield damage.
It raises a big question, doesn't it? Does this mean we need to think differently about what war damage even means? Like expand the definition beyond just bombs and buildings?
I think that's exactly right. We need to consider these longer-term environmental consequences, the societal ripples. They're just as much a part of the cost of conflict.
Okay, let's shift focus now to economic pressure points. The U.S., China, Brazil. What's the latest there? Starting with China.
Right. So, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has put out a pretty stark warning to Beijing.
About Russian oil.
Exactly. He basically said China could face quite heavy tariffs if they keep buying Russian oil. He said this yesterday in Stockholm.
What was the tone like?
Pretty blunt, actually. He said, and I'm quoting here, "The Chinese take their sovereignty very seriously. We don't want to interfere with that sovereignty. So if they prefer, they can pay 100% tariff."
Wow. A 100% tariff.
Yeah. Then he added, "I think anyone who buys sanctioned Russian oil should be prepared for that." It's strong language.
And this comes just as former President Trump confirmed those secondary tariffs are kicking in soon.
Yeah, hours before Bessent spoke, Trump confirmed they'll go into effect in 10 days.
Yeah.
So August 7th is the deadline unless the Kremlin accepts the ceasefire.
How do these secondary tariffs work again?
They target countries and companies that keep doing business with Russia. Basically, it penalizes their access to the U.S. market.
And China's the main buyer of Russian oil right now.
Correct. So the impact could be huge. Chinese exports to the U.S. potentially taxed up to 100%. Yeah. That means higher prices for American consumers, obviously, and just immense pressure on Chinese companies.
How's Beijing responding?
Well, despite the pressure, they seem pretty firm in their partnership with Moscow. In fact, Russia and China are actually gearing up for joint naval exercises in the Sea of Japan.
When are those?
August 1st to August 5th. Interfax confirmed it, citing Russia's Pacific Fleet. They're describing them as defensive, not aimed at anyone specific.
Actions speaking louder than words, maybe?
Perhaps. What's fascinating here, though, is this broader strategy. Using economic tariffs, not just for trade disputes, but as a real tool of foreign policy. Geopolitical pressure through economics. And it has immediate effects on trade, sure, but also these potential long-term consequences for global alliances, maybe even restructuring economic partnerships worldwide. It's shifting the game from diplomacy to economic muscle.
It truly does shift the landscape. But is there a point where these economic levers become too aggressive? Like, could they backfire, maybe alienate allies, or even mess up the global system they're trying to influence?
That is a critical question. Absolutely. When tariffs start looking politically motivated, maybe not purely economic, or worse, when they seem to target another country's internal stuff, like their courts.
Like the Brazil situation we're about to discuss.
Exactly. That's when they risk being seen as an overreach. And that can strain old alliances, push countries to look for other partners, maybe even create new rivalries. It definitely risks fragmenting the global economy. It's a very delicate balance, between using leverage and causing unintended blowback.
Okay, so let's dive into that Brazil situation. The 50% tariffs. The reports link them to irritation over the legal case against Bolsonaro, Trump's ally.
That's the narrative, yes. Yeah. And the core legal issue is whether this fits under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA.
Which is meant for actual national emergencies.
Correct. Critics, including a New York court already, are saying these tariffs stretch that law way too far, that they're really about political grievances, not an emergency.
And there are companies suing over this.
There are. Jeffrey Schwab, a lawyer at the Liberty Center representing 5 U.S. companies, basically said this shows the president thinks he has unrestricted power to tax whoever he wants, which he argues is a big problem for the rule of law.
So this threat against Brazil related to the Bolsonaro case could actually be used in that lawsuit.
That's the expectation, yeah, that it'll come up in the appeal hearings in Washington. The lower court, the International Trade Court in New York, already ruled back in May that the administration went beyond its legal authority with IEPA.
But the tariffs are still in place.
They are. While the appeal goes on, it could potentially reach the Supreme Court.
And Brazil's position, they're a big trading partner.
Right, it's largest after China, yeah. The Lula government's trying to negotiate to get them reduced or suspended, but they've admitted it might not happen before the August 1st deadline.
Why not?
Well, reports suggest the Trump administration is focusing on deals with bigger partners first: Japan, the EU, the UK.
And the official justification for the Brazil tariffs is still the trade deficit under IEPA.
That's the claim of national emergency, linked to the U.S. trade deficit. But, counter-arguments point out Brazil has actually had trade deficits with the U.S. since 2008. They're not some huge exporter causing a deficit.
So the justification seems thin.
Well, Professor James Hillman at Georgetown basically said these tariffs are just unrelated to any U.S. emergency or the trade deficit. And Daniel, a Yale law professor, was even stronger, saying it's so clearly outside the bounds of the law that it's shocking. He fully expects it to go to the Supreme Court.
So the legal ground looks shaky.
Increasingly shaky, according to several lawyers in Austin who track this stuff. But the administration isn't stopping. They're using other trade laws, too, like Section 301 for unfair practices, Section 232 for national security.
So hedging their bets legally.
Seems like it. For instance, the letter Trump sent to Lula didn't just mention tariffs. It also opened a formal Section 301 investigation into Brazil's trade barriers, especially digital trade. And Brazil's Attorney General, Jorge Macias, publicly said he thinks they launched that 301 probe because the IEPA argument is just too fragile to stand alone.
Interesting strategy.
Yeah, and Daniel Canista, an attorney at Cowan Morning, noted there's this emerging consensus that the IEPA tariffs probably will fall in court eventually. But court cases are slow.
Right.
And the administration seems to be exploring this time to the fullest, using the tariffs now for maximum pressure in negotiations.
Is that pressure working?
It appears so. Countries like Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Canada, they're reportedly rushing to close deals before that August 1st deadline for new increases. Getting out from under a potential 27.5% auto tariff seems to be a huge motivator.
Okay, and one more big development with Brazil: sanctions.
Yes, this just came through. The Trump government has imposed sanctions on the specific minister or judge who is overseeing the judicial process against Bolsonaro.
Sanctioning a judge.
Well, they're framing it carefully. It's officially a sanction not on a judge or the judiciary, but on the Brazilian state. But the target is clearly linked to that specific judicial process.
Wow. That feels unprecedented.
It really does. This raises a huge question, doesn't it? Sanctioning a judge, or even framing it as sanctioning the state because of a judge's actions in a trade dispute, it pushes hard against international norms, sovereignty.
The rule of law issues again.
Exactly. What's the balance between using economic leverage, which countries do, and respecting the rule of law and judicial independence globally? It forces us to peel back layers, doesn't it? When we think about global power, we often picture military might. But this Brazil case reminds us how potent and how legally messy economic leverage can be.
Okay, from those very complex legal and economic knots, let's shift to something equally complex but deeply urgent on the human level: Syria, specifically Suwayda in the south.
Right, a critical humanitarian situation there. The UN is actually preparing to send a direct aid convoy.
That's good news. What triggered this?
It follows days of really intense violence that tragically left over 1,000 people dead and forced about 175,000 from their homes.
1,000 dead? That's horrific.
It is. And this UN convoy is only possible because of a key breakthrough. The Syrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs finally gave formal authorization for UN agencies to access Suwayda.
So they couldn't get in before?
Only very limited aid got through via the Syrian Arab Red Crescent. They made 3 emergency deliveries, but nothing sustained.
What's in the UN convoy?
Food and other essential supplies, according to Marion W., who heads the UN World Food Program in Syria.
Can you give us some background on the violence? Who was fighting?
Sure. The clashes apparently started around July 13th. It was between armed groups from the Druze minority that concentrated in that region and Bedouin combatants who are traditionally more tribal, nomadic.
When the government tried to intervene.
The Syrian government sent troops to try and contain it, but reports say the violence actually increased after that. The Syrian Network for Human Rights is the source for that figure of over 1,000 deaths.
Is there a ceasefire now?
There was a U.S.-mediated truce that helped calm things down about a week after the fighting started, but the situation is still described as extremely unstable, very fragile.
And the conditions for people still there?
Dire, based on reports from residents. Lack of electricity, water, food, medicine. The basics.
And many were displaced, you said.
Yeah, over 52,000 people fled to the neighboring province of Dara, which unfortunately is facing its own humanitarian struggles.
Has the World Food Program done anything else there recently?
They had managed to get about 250 tons of wheat flour to bakeries in Suwayda before this latest escalation, plus ready-to-eat meals for 50,000 people and other food aid for about 10,000 more.
But getting aid in consistently has been the main problem.
Exactly. The lack of security has just made it impossible so far to set up a regular, reliable aid route into the region. This UN authorization is a potentially significant step, but the security challenge remains huge.
Zooming out from Suwayda, what does this tell us about humanitarian aid in general in these conflict zones?
Yeah, zooming out, this situation in Syria really just highlights the incredible complexities of trying to deliver aid in active or even post-conflict zones.
It's not just about resources, is it?
Not at all. It's not simply about having the supplies or the will to help. You absolutely need these political authorizations like the one Syria just gave. That's crucial. But even with authorization, you still face huge challenges in ensuring security for the aid workers themselves and just keeping those supply lines open consistently.
So geopolitics directly impacts getting food to starving people.
Directly. Geopolitical realities, who controls what territory. It all dictates whether vulnerable people get help or remain cut off, sometimes for long periods. It's a stark reminder.
Wow. What a journey we've taken today in this deep dive. I mean, from the battlefields in Ukraine and those completely unexpected locusts to this really intricate dance of global trade, tariffs, legal challenges with the U.S., China, Brazil, and then landing on the urgent humanitarian needs in Syria. It really hammers home that you have to look way beyond the headlines to understand what's truly going on.
Absolutely, you really do.
So as we wrap up, what's a final thought for our listeners to chew on?
Okay, well, maybe this. We live in this incredibly interconnected world, right? Information is everywhere, but real context, real understanding is often scarce.
True.
So how does digging into these specific, sometimes messy details from these crises that seem separate on the surface, how does that actually prepare us? Not just to understand what's happening now, but maybe to anticipate future challenges and perhaps even spot opportunities for global cooperation down the line.
Connecting the dots not just for today, but for tomorrow. That's a great thought to end on.
Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.